Well, good afternoon, everyone. Guy Page, Vermont Daily Chronicle. What a way to start. Happy Good Friday, everyone. So, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Guy?
All right, not too bad.
Bit of a wild week on your end.
You know, every week we say this, that, wow, this was a wild week. I wonder what's going to happen next week. Well, what happened next week was Monday morning on Water Tower Hill in Colchester, where Tim and I and his late mom used to watch the fireworks sometimes. A Palestinian was detained by immigration officials. And oh boy, did the stuff ever hit the fan. Why don't you roll what you got there?
Absolutely.
And because there's nothing more honorable than dying for a noble cause, for freedom, for humanity, and for justice.
Yeah, that's the guy who was arrested. He's apparently a Buddhist, and I guess it's okay to die if you're not killing, although you got to wonder, he's also he was asked by Bill, this guy went on, his name is Moshen Mahdawi, has a camp in West Fairleigh apparently, is very involved in helping the homeless and in Jewish-Arab relations, and he's sort of a good citizen, regarded as a good citizen in the Upper Valley by people who know him. And not just sort of liberal type people, but some real conservatives as well. So that's the Moshen Mahdawi who was detained that a lot of Vermonters know. Now, however, the Moshen Mahdawi on Columbia University was a whole different cat. Part of what he did was he was a co-president of the most active, at times violent, and for a lot of Jewish students, scary, threatening, and physically violent groups called Students for Justice in Palestine. And was he personally involved in that? Don't know, but with rhetoric like that, Paul, I got to think that maybe he certainly wasn't discouraging it. Okay.
Well, you do want to show this photo of him? Is that?
Yeah, please.
So this is kind of the motion that most people, maybe some of the people that are saying, oh, he's not a dangerous guy,
right.
He's just somebody hanging out with his dog.
He's a very articulate, well-educated Buddhist hanging out with his Irish setter.
Sure.
And et cetera. And I'm not saying he's not that. I mean, people go through, they develop.
Yeah.
And it could be that at some point, he was a real Hamas sympathizer, or as he calls it, an empathizer. He empathizes with. He was asked by Bill Whitaker on 60 Minutes. This guy was the spokesman on 60 Minutes. So this is a very high-profile guy. He said, boy, what Hamas did was just a terrible act. How can you justify that? And he said, well, I'm not saying I'm justifying it, but I do empathize with them, with Hamas. And he said that when he was 10 years old, an Israeli soldier shot his best friend in the chest, and he held him as he died. And he said he vowed revenge from that point on. Revenge.
And he said that on 60 Minutes.
Yes, on 60 Minutes.
We should make that very clear,
yes.
that that's not something that Guy is just
right.
talking about. And I got to say, the situation, in my opinion, glows simply because he was on 60 Minutes. I mean, mainstream media and the folks that are making that kind of news, a lot of interesting characters in those circles. So just to be fair, I mean, who is he really, this guy?
So words, good question, Paul. Words are one thing.
That's right.
You've heard some of the words. Actions are another. And America is a free speech country. One would assume that there's a lot of latitude given to your free speech, even if you're a green card person, which he is, not a complete U.S. citizen. But there's a lot of latitude given towards free speech. But what maybe has he done? Well, according to a lawsuit filed in March of 25, very well footnoted, very well developed lawsuit, the organization that he was the co-president of was getting its marching orders from Hamas on October 7th, on the day, maybe even before then. There were signs that like 3 minutes before the attack was launched, there was a social media post that came up and said, "We're back." So, and they were immediately calling for days of what the Hamas people call days of rage. They wanted to have a demonstration, and the background of this artwork was the paragliders, which was what the Hamas people used to come in and to kill all those Israeli citizens. They used paragliders. So a really incendiary call to action here. And that was like just a day or two after the event. Clearly orchestrated, clearly planned ahead of time. And they had these hands in these things. And as it turns out, there was a quote-unquote playbook for the National Students for Justice for Palestine given to the Columbia chapter that came right from Hamas. Because they knew that this thing was not going to work if the U.S. backed Israel. And so they had a propaganda campaign already launched and ready to go right from our college campuses, hoping that America's thought leaders from the top down would say, you know what, yeah, boy, Israel really has gone too far this time, even though they were the ones who were attacked. And we're going to back off supporting them, leaving Israel hanged out to dry after they had been attacked.
I just want to add a note on that point, too. I think people, they love to, I've seen this whole conversation, Israel-Palestine, has been increasing in the United States. And I can't help but to wonder if the anti-Israel sentiment in the U.S. Is rising because of a growing anti-U.S., United States push, right? I mean, I think people really do underestimate, first of all, radical jihadism is very real. There are radical extremists that are, in this country right now, sleeper cells that exist out there. Yeah. And that doesn't just include radical Islam, but that includes...
That's an established fact. I've heard state police say ISIS has sleeper cells in Montreal.
So
yes.
So there you go. That's pretty dang close to us. And then, not to mention the Chinese, they seem to have some group, an organization happening here in the United States as well. We know about them buying up a lot of farmland.
Yep.
But I think what this whole story is about is a larger question of domestic enemies in the United States, and how many are there actually? We can talk all day about what's happening in the Middle East, but I think we're losing sight of right here what's happening in America.
Well, isn't there a saying among anti-Israel, anti-Zionists about the little Satan and the great Satan? The little Satan is Israel. The great Satan is the United States.
Yes.
So in their minds, there is this linking of the two. So in that sense, Paul, I definitely see a connection there.
Well, there's a lot of people look at, like, a lot of the people that are on the other side of, whatever you want to call it, the Iron Curtain, the other side of the West, whatever you want to look at, they look at the United States as really a great empire to a certain degree. And arguably, in human history, there's never been an organized military as powerful as the United States military. Right. Never in history. That's 100% true. But I still think that's not to say that the whole United States and its people and our country and our countrymen and our families aren't deserving of protection. Like, you can have a problem with what the military is doing in the Middle East with the U.S. interests and our foreign policy. I think that's totally okay.
So if you know, Paul, that the U.S. has the most powerful conventional military, you're not going to attack them that way, are you?
No.
How? You're going to attack them maybe
proxy.
Through, I don't know, bioterror?
Yeah.
Through domestic
That's right.
terrorism?
Sure.
through political upheaval. Maybe you're going to bring in some, I know, this is a great one. Bring in fentanyl. Export fentanyl to the United States and do your very best to encourage that.
And have open borders.
Oh, yeah,
Let
yeah.
anyone come in. See, like that I think that this whole thing is a much bigger picture than America's so horrible and part of what's happening there. No, this is about domestic safety of people here in the United States, which we have for the last 4 years. Honestly, it's been turned against the people. Now we should come back to that because we should show the Becca clip before we go there.
We should. Now, I do want to ask you first, Paul, do we have any comments about the subject that we're talking about right now?
Yes.
Before we go to Becca, and then we'll go to Becca.
Absolutely. Anything Goes writes, hey, you know what's more noble than dying for justice? Living for it. And then in response to that, they also wrote, damn, Vermont looks good in that photo, the photo of Moshen with his dog.
Right.
So he looks great in that photo, too, like a peaceful peacemaker, as described.
Well, that's his photo from the Buddhist Association of Columbia University. So that may not actually be Vermont. But anyway, be that as it may. It might be, I don't know.
Well, before that, maybe we should just go quickly to an ad. And maybe we should talk. You've got your hat over there, Guy.
Yes,
Before we
I need to tell this story.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so as all of you faithful watchers of Friday at 4 know, I've been bugging Judy Taranovich at Procter Gas for the hats. Well, last Saturday at the Fox Run Resort in beautiful Ludlow, she was speaking and I was listening. And when it was all done, she walks up with a little gift bag, with the crepe paper and everything, the way men can't do it, but women can, make a gift bag look good. And in it were my hat, your hat, and there's also, you haven't seen it yet, Paul, but there is a generic propane industry hat coming your way as well.
Woo!
And so, Judy, thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. We love it.
We hope you're tuned in out there right now, listening
yes,
in,
and
watching
we
our
know she's going to
celebration.
watch it at some point. So thank you, and we love the hats and love your support. It was great hearing you and speaking with you at the Fox Run Resort. Good time for an ad, I suppose.
So yeah, speaking of which,
Right.
Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas. Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency and off-grid living? You may be a contractor seeking propane tank and line installation and related services for your clients. Either way, Procter Gas is there to help. They provide comprehensive services and a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland, Vermont, and beyond. So again, Procter Gas, thank you so much for being one of our first sponsors, actually our first sponsor on the show. And also, Guy, do it, show it off. Let them know. That's right, folks. Our very own bumper stickers just in yesterday. We have a very limited supply, so please reach out to us if you want one. We're selling them for $5. Okay, we're doing that. We're not mailing them. If you see us and you have $5, we're gonna have a few of those on us.
Hey, I'll mail them.
Well, you're talking about your profit margin, so you might not want to do that. It's pretty expensive to send.
Really? One of these? Just like sending just a stamp.
Well, we'll have to talk about it because it might be just sending with a stamp, but it takes a lot of time. So we'll have to talk about that. But there's more to it than just sending out.
You're asking yourself, folks, who's the boss here?
Yeah. Well, if you want to do it,
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe I will.
if you want to mail them, go ahead.
Maybe I will.
I'm not mailing them.
Maybe I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Point is, if you want one, let us know. We'll get you one. We'll make sure that you
Yes.
get one. And we're going to be doing an event some point next month after the end of session, probably in Northfield. But we'll see exactly what we come up with. But we want you. We're going to have more information on that. We haven't really solidified any plans, but we do want to have a kind of a free speech gathering in Vermont. Our viewers and listeners are welcome. We want you to be there. Our readers, and it's kind of going to be maybe a celebration of sorts of some of the interesting things, some of the wins, if you want to call them that. But more on that later. We'll come back to that. But just throwing it out there, we wanted you guys to know we do have bumper stickers. And we'll talk about mailing it. I'm not closed off entirely, but we should talk about that.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
So back to the story. Guy had a pretty great, honestly, some really awesome coverage in the State House this week, kind of pressing our state senators about the story that Guy and I have been talking about. And here's a little.
First, I want to set it up
Sure,
before
Guy.
you roll
Yeah,
that.
please do.
So it was all the talk in the State House on Tuesday that another person had been arrested, and it was someone in Colchester on Water Tower Hill. But hey, I got to tell you, Tuesday was a beautiful day, and I wanted to just go out and go for a walk. And I'm walking past the Senate Pro Tem's office, and there's a bunch of reporters in there. And there's Phil Baruth, and Senator Becca White, and Senator Kesharam Hinsdale all standing there. I'm thinking, what is going on? And it dawned on me, holy cow, this is a press conference. And I walk in. This was right after we'd published our first story on really who is this guy, Moshen Mahdawi. And I said to 7 Days reporter Kevin McCollum, what's this about? He says, you know what this is about. I said, I don't know what this is about. And he said, it's about, the guy they arrested. And what then happens is roll it, Paul.
Sure.
Getting that information. I would also say that's
60 minutes.
That's what we are going to experience with any individual who's being targeted. They're going to tell you that this person is a terrorist. They're going to tell you that this person is dangerous. And they're going to tell you that they're connected to an organization. That is not accurate information. Moshen is an individual who is resides in White River Junction. He is a peacemaker, he is a bridge builder, he is a community leader, and any attempt to decry him as a terrorist, that would be a thing you would do in a due process, even if you're trying to verify that information. So I don't think it's appropriate for you as someone in the media to promote that without substantiating it, and I certainly do not believe it's the role of the government to take people who are legal residents, who have green cards, without verifiable information.
Maybe they have verifiable
They
information.
did not provide it.
Well, do you expect them to tell you as someone on the side of the road?
We do expect due process.
Okay.
There is a very well-established path for the government to deport someone. But it involves due process, it involves hearings, it involves a judge, and a judge's judicial discretion. None of that is happening, and the administration is making it clear that it's not happening on purpose.
Well, in fact, this was not an arrest. He was detained. Apparently, it's an administrative thing where he is being found in violation. And it may be that he'll have to go before a judge. I don't know the law well enough, but I was talking to a state's attorney type person today, and he was saying, actually, this is really more administrative. And the federal government has been noted many times to conservatives' dismay, has an awful lot of administrative power, not judicial, administrative power. You go before a hearing officer and they say, you're wrong and this is the penalty. And this appears to be the case here.
So like Department of Homeland kind of has that, or is it?
Well, would that be ICE, essentially
Yeah.
Homeland? Yeah, it'd be the immigration people.
Interesting. So, it's kind of, I keep seeing this due process. It almost seems to be like the mockingbird, right? We're just everybody's gonna say the same thing, due process. And I just saw a tweet from J.D. Vance like just a few minutes ago, basically saying something like, I'll just pull it up real quick, folks.
Please.
It's pretty. It was literally maybe. He says, I'll show it to you here. He says, call me crazy, but if you get 2 hearings and a valid deportation order, then you shouldn't be in the United States. And of course, he's referring to a different case. He's not talking about this one specifically. But that's kind of what we're getting at is what this is that with the administration change, it's a redefining of what a domestic terrorist is.
Good point, Paul.
And I love,
Yeah.
my favorite part about what Becca White is saying is, they're going to label this person as a terrorist, and they're going to be affiliated with an organization, and they're going.
Oh yeah, he was.
Well, and that's
Now we know.
that's right. And there's information verifiably that this person does have some kind of, there's definitely plenty of questions to be asked. Let's
Yes.
just put it that way. Let's
Yes.
start there.
Yeah.
Being on 60 Minutes, in my opinion, is enough. But furthermore, it's a redefining of what a domestic terrorist or a domestic threat to the United States is. So just yesterday, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, released this is what they're calling it, a Director's Initiative Group, declassified strategic implementation plan for countering domestic terrorism from the Biden administration. So the Director's Initiative Group, which was created by Tulsi Gabbard and her team
Yeah.
at National Intelligence, is looking into some of the work that was done by the Biden administration.
Some of the domestic terror work done by the Biden administration.
Specifically,
Gotcha.
domestic terror work. Yeah, and so I have it on screen here so folks can see. So this is it right here. This is DIG, and here's the report. This is from the Biden administration, and it's 20 pages. But what I have here is the 14th page, and this kind of will give you a good idea of what the Biden administration saw as domestic terrorists. And so basically you have here, rein in the proliferation of ghost guns, encourage state adoption of extreme risk protection orders, and drive other executive and legislative action, including banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Right? Implement, this is the second bullet point, implement the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to address the hate crime reporting barriers faced by disadvantaged communities by promoting law enforcement training and resources to prevent and address bias-motivated crimes, improve federal hate crimes data, and analyses to eliminate hate crimes under reporting, mitigate xenophobia and bias, including by advancing inclusion of the nation's COVID-19 response. Right? So there's more to this too, and if you haven't already had an opportunity,
Who are the targets there, Paul?
well, it's basically anybody who opposes the draconian laws and rules of COVID-19, right? If you look up COVID-19 hate crimes, and I think I do have it pulled up. I'll just pull it up again because I deleted it. The 2019 Hate Crimes Act specifically, what was that, right? You may remember, if you were paying attention at all to anything back in the COVID days, basically, anyone who questioned where the lab leak came from or where COVID came from was basically deemed a racist against Chinese people. That's what the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act was. It defines COVID-19 hate crime as a violent crime that is motivated by two things. One, the actual or perceived characteristic of any person, the actual or perceived relationship to the spread of COVID-19 of any person because of that characteristic. So if you remember, they were specifically saying that Asians were being targeted, Chinese Americans, this kind of thing. So the Biden administration is taking this document to counter domestic terrorism and basically pointing the apparatuses, the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security and weaponizing it against American citizens. And as Guy just described, basically Department of Homeland Security has a lot more administrative power than it does judicial, right? So they can get away with a lot more than having to go through a court system than any other organization, right? And I think there's more that we should probably uncover there.
So I know pro-lifers too were gone after. And one of the things that really bothered me a lot was early on in the Biden administration, and we reported on this. This is not a myth. This absolutely was happening, which is the FBI was instructed by the Department of Justice, by Merrick Garland, to monitor people who complain about DEI and other things at local school boards. So if you showed up and you made a fuss about your kid being asked to use pronouns or whatever, then that would be getting the FBI's attention. And that's crazy. And they later, a month or two later, they kind of backed off and said, oh, we didn't really mean that. But yeah, that is what they meant.
Well, and it kind of comes back to that whole question that I was asking Mary Holland last week at Children's Health Defense.
Right.
Like, when you have Department of Homeland, and I mean, I remember another thing Phil Scott said during that whole time is, you're not a patriot for not wearing a mask. That's not patriotic.
Right.
It's like there was this push from the federal government to basically deem anyone who questioned the narrative during that time as literally a domestic terrorist. That means myself, right? That means Guy Page, right? That means I could name another list
You
of
certainly
people.
lose your job, that's for sure.
Well, you definitely could lose
Yeah.
your job. You could lose a lot
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to pour us, boo-hoo, because I don't actually feel that way.
Right.
But the point is if you look, save me all the crying and the pain about, how draconian and crazy this is. No, they're removing somebody who's hardly a citizen from the United States.
Not a citizen.
Not a citizen,
Yeah,
ultimately.
was perhaps applying for it, wanted to be one.
They're removing somebody who is advocating for causes that are not in line with the American interests, especially in our
Which
country.
gets back to, I drilled down on this yesterday in a story. How can the U.S. government go after someone from just what they're saying? Well, as a matter of fact, if you have a green card, one of the ways that you can be deported is if the Secretary of State decides that your actions, your words, your potential actions would be against the strategic interests of the United States. So I would think that if you are actively working with Hamas, a designated terror organization responsible for the deaths of 45 Americans in their attack on October 7th, that might be working against the strategic interests of the United States.
I would agree
And
with that.
Marco Rubio would be well within his rights to say, you know what, pick up that guy.
So before we go to comments here quickly, before we go to an ad, I just want to read a comment from David Kurtzetter, who writes, due process comes after the detaining of a person.
True.
So, they keep talking about due process, and how it's so horrible that somebody's been detained. Well, how do we get to that point in the first place without actually taking them in?
And I think that's right. And I think pretty much everyone agrees that once someone is detained, there are due process rules and regs to follow, and that they should be followed.
Yeah.
You can't just, whisk someone out and say you have no due process.
Sure. Okay, so with that, folks, we're going to go to an ad. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ranmar Corporation. Ranmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They are a local family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact us today for all of your contracting and real estate needs. So Ranmar Corporation, we're hopeful that maybe we can get a hat too. I know Guy and I were just on this rampage for free hats, but hey, I'll wear them. I'll wear it proudly.
Well,
This is my new. I'm gonna be sporting this all over the place. So
Yeah.
why not?
We walk by Randy's house, and when the weather warms up, he's often out on his porch. So Randy, if you're watching this, I will be asking you for a hat. And if you don't want to give us one, that's fine. We understand. But man, we'd love to wear your swag on the show.
Okay. So with that, Guy, we've kind of covered this. I think we've covered it pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
I know we got other things that we want to talk about today, but I just want to thank everyone that's participated in the conversation. And I do have one more comment I think we should read. John Guin writes, it's important to build and maintain communities where people work together. Strong communities are important. Schools are a vital part of all communities. And I think he must be talking, that's a comment from a few moments back. He must be kind of talking about, the universities and what's coming out of these, educational communities, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you're kind of seeing this, I don't know if I want to call it a color revolution. Some people have referred to it as that. Just between all the different groups of people right now in the United States. Guy just, for folks who can't see Guy just gave me a look like, what are you talking about?
Quizzical, huh?
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about? Well, I think that there's just a lot more groups in the United States that are, the Antifas, the BLMs of today, whatever I don't know what they are right now. I think maybe they're in a stage of regrouping too, like these groups. I mean, we all remember during the first Trump administration how wild things ultimately got, especially towards the end. And I think we just really underestimate how much of this is here in the United States. And it's really, honestly, it's really sad, honestly, that we live in a country where there's so many people that just like hate their own country, and we can't have like a society, you know, it's too bad.
Yeah. Well, when you've been taught that your country is racist and its history is racist, and you have no moral right to anything that you have, well, yeah, that's what's going to come out.
He replied to it, John Goen, he says, regarding sleeper cells, communities are safer when they are strong ties. Basically saying, so like, you know, if you're having a sleeper cell come in from China, like as an example, if you're in a small, tight-knit community, that's never going to happen because, you know, people would know about it, right? People might take issue with that. And again, you're right. If we're being told that you're racist for being opposed to that, you're a problem for being anti-immigration or refugees, like whatever it is, you're a racist, you're a problem. No, I think, you know, you should be allowed to say that, and tight-knit communities absolutely will.
That's right.
So, Guy, I have a question from Lisa Bombardier. She says, are you going to have coverage for the rally tomorrow? What rally tomorrow? Do you know, Guy?
What rally, Lisa?
Lisa, help us out.
Let us know.
We don't know.
I gather there's something happened in South Royalton, a community safety rally. James Ellers, who works for John Rogers, was telling me about that. What rally? Let us know, Lisa.
So another issue we want to talk about today is the whole, I asked folks on X 2 days ago, I guess maybe it was Wednesday, I said, if the Trump administration were to start looking into Vermont, where should they start? More importantly, where would you start? Serious answers only, asking for a friend. And I put it out there kind of like as a joke, but serious. You know, I would be very curious to see what people had to say. And we got a great response from a lot of different people.
Super.
Especially folks that are pretty well engaged into the whole Vermont scene. So we have a comment from Mark Coaster, who, by the way, just shout out to Mark. Had a great conversation with him today.
Well, who was Mark Coaster?
Mark Coaster is a former candidate, actually current candidate for U.S. Congress, running against Becca Balint. That's how her name is said. At least that's what he said to me earlier. And he could have been joking. If you ever talk with Mark, he's a pretty gruff, funny guy. I don't know how else to describe him. He's got a lot of interesting points. And he and I talked today before today's show, and just great to bounce some thoughts that I'm having off of him, because you know he's watching all this pretty closely. But so where he would start is looking into the validity of the environmental court created as a branch of Superior Court. No other state has such a thing, and it is devastating to economic growth. I actually don't know much about that at all. Maybe you do.
Well, yes, we do have an environmental court. It does a lot of Act 250 type stuff. Also, I was speaking with the Wood Products Association this week, Rob O'Halloran, and a logger, a lumber guy from Brattleboro. And they said that Canada, for example, the lumber is so much cheaper there because they do it on their huge federal lands. It's very well subsidized. And we have like no production facilities here. And it takes forever to build anything in Vermont, much less a wood manufacturing facility, which they're not all that crazy about anyway. So it's almost like the deck is stacked against the industry here in Vermont. And so tariffs, in the short run, make life more difficult for them. But if they do make it, in the long run, that we're more competitive with Canada, maybe in several years, tariffs might end up being a good thing. You know,
that's kind of the argument that I keep hearing too. And I've seen a lot of people talking about this, is that the tariffs would cause, lumber prices to spike and skyrocket.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah.
But I think that's the problem that you just mentioned, and that so many people in Vermont right now are unwilling to ask, is how did we end up in this situation in the first place? I see a lot of people complaining about, just as an example, Peter Welch complaining about, I forget what library lost funding, but a library in Vermont, public library, lost COVID funds, and how cruel it was because it happened without any prior warning and blah, blah, blah. And the question that everybody should be asking is, how did we get to a point where an entire state government is essentially a subsidized welfare state where not even public libraries are properly funded, right? So to build on the point of like, how does that connect to the lumber industry? It's like, why is there a court that makes it impossible for people to build anything in the state of Vermont?
Well, there's a real connection between the fact that Vermont has an environmental court and we have the oldest housing in the country, and we don't have enough housing.
That's right.
In other words, it's all part of the don't build it in my backyard movement. So you mentioned the federal funding for the libraries.
Yeah.
Stop me, Paul, if I've already said this because my mind's so confused. But there's some good news, I think really good news, that has come out of this. And that there is a federally funded state program that helps local history, helps people record local history. You know, who doesn't love local history, oral history, that sort of thing? I think it's terrific. But federally funded, well, they got some funding, the program's going along fine, and then, oh my gosh, they got doged. So what happened? Did the program just fall apart and collapse and suddenly we're all ignorant about local history? No. Some supporters, some Vermont supporters, 2 of them wrote big checks. Vermonters who care about local history said, oh, you need some money to help local history in Vermont? Write a check, here you go. And you know what? Maybe that's how it's supposed to be anyway. Rather than a taxpayer from Oregon paying for Vermont local history. Maybe it should be us.
Well, and that's the point is like the nation elected Donald Trump, and really Elon Musk, people don't like that, but they did elect him to a certain, he was a huge part of this. The nation did this because the nation can't afford all this crap. You know, and that's why I get just like I've been so, to be honest, so bothered by the rhetoric I'm seeing from Vermont's delegation and our statewide officials, you know, pointing the fingers at the Trump administration. And part of me can't blame them because nobody wants to take accountability for anything, right? I mean, to say that it's entirely Peter Welch's fault is probably not true. But the fact that they're not talking about how much we are dependent on the federal government and how we ended up in the situation, and maybe we shouldn't be, and maybe we should take a look at some other states who actually have balanced budgets and states that, you know, don't spend more money than they take in. Like, why aren't we talking about that?
Right.
We're just saying, you know, Peter Welch, I'm really harping on Peter Welch because I see it a lot from him. He put together this graphic, basically, all the things that Vermonters love are going to be more expensive because of Donald Trump's tariffs. And it's like, well, wait a minute, if we maybe, I don't know, did something about the fact that Vermont is the 3rd most taxed state in the country, maybe that would help. But they don't even talk.
Don't talk about that, Paul.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's so frustrating. I
Are you about to say it's an outrage?
It's outrageous. The oligarchs in this state are out of control. Sorry.
Not bad.
I've been practicing.
Okay.
Well, actually, you know, and that's the other thing, just to bring up Bernie. You know, there he is. Did you see, I think we published a story on this on Saturday, or maybe it was Monday. Bernie's speaking
Pathetic.
at Coachella Music Festival.
Which is this big deal. I didn't even know it exists, but it's like the Newport Folk Festival in California, sort of.
Oh, it's the you know, everybody who age, you know, 16 through 25 or whatever.
With $700 to drop on it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, funny enough, a large percentage of those folks, something like a quarter of them, financed their tickets so that they could go to see the Coachella Music Festival. Oh yeah, you're talking about like the worst of the worst, in my opinion, right?
Wow.
And Bernie is at the Coachella Music Festival, basically up there talking about authoritarianism and how horrible, you know, what the Trump administration is doing and all this different stuff. And I'm just thinking, watching him, you know, all these kids out there who are probably on drugs.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, just zombie brain dead.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Bernie, you know, this is so great, and it's just, to me, it's so weird. Like, that's the kind of show that road show that Bernie Sanders is running. Meanwhile, people back here at home are suffering. You know, really suffering too, and it's
the really bizarre thing about that, Paul, is that I first heard about that is that Bernie Sanders draws a crowd of 36,000 people. I thought, wow. He's doing pretty well with his AOC tour. Then I realized that they were all there for a folk festival, and the old guy walked on stage.
Well, that was, no, the Bernie actually did draw, well, apparently a crowd of 36,000 people, but that was before.
Okay.
So he went later in the evening to Coachella.
Oh, all right. I stand corrected. Okay.
I just think it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I've been reading a little bit more and more about the CIA and their involvement with kind of like the 1960s music and drug movement, and really how that plays into and there's more, and I want to talk more about this eventually, maybe later on down the road, but like MK Ultra, the actual projects to kind of do mind control experiments on the public. I know you're making the, well, what
I'm making the
you're saying, Paul, what are you
face.
talking about? But I guarantee you a lot of our listeners out there know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because that's a very real thing where, you know, they were doing these kind of like experiments on the mind using drugs and how malleable the mind was. So when you get up there and speak in front of a bunch of kids on drugs, it's just like, I don't think it's very.
It's a pretty easy sell.
It's a pretty easy sell.
Yeah.
And I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong.
I see. Okay. Okay. Good. So.
We also have a comment here from EJ. He says Vermont is listed on the DOGE website. Several leases are being canceled.
Right here in Barrie, right here in Main Street.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think the larger picture too. You know, I asked this question. Essentially, I'm asking online, if you were to DOGE Vermont, where would you start? And I think we a lot of us already kind of know the answer to the question. It's like DOGE already is happening to Vermont. They're targeting specific programs. They're targeting, you know, wasteful buildings, wasteful spending, anywhere where they think they can cut costs. They're doing it. But you know, as for maybe Vermont having a spotlight on it or being targeted, you know, I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, they, first of all, nobody wants to see that happen, or at least a lot of folks don't want to see that happen that are part of the establishment in Vermont, whatever you want to call it. And they don't think it's going to happen, you know. So we see earlier this week, I saw a headline that Vermont's education secretary is saying Vermont will not, or, well, Guy, you take this, because I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth.
So when the executive order came out that said all states cannot be doing DEI in their education systems, the state of Vermont didn't say, well, nuts to that, we're going to do DEI all we want, just like we are right now. They did not say that. They instead said, oh, well, we read that order very carefully, and by our interpretation, we do not think that we are out of compliance with the letter of the law. So in other words, oh, we're compliant. That really, in this hen house, there's really no one here but us chickens. Really. But the problem is that once the farmer comes along with his shotgun and he sees the fox in the hen house saying, well, I'm really being very compliant, Mr. Farmer, isn't going to cut it. Because anyone who's been inside our public schools knows that it's suffused with DEI and with all sorts of transgender stuff. And I have a feeling that if the Trump administration comes in and takes a look, they're going to say, you're wrong. You are absolutely out of compliance and no more money for you, if they want to.
There's a lot of examples too that people keep sending me. You know, I asked this question and people are basically, hey, look into this, look into that. I mean, look, I get so many inquiries basically like of whether it's DEI related or some level of corruption. I get a lot of them. I wish I could address them all, but we can't, unfortunately. But this is one where we can say, okay, hey, look, here's the Vermont Education Secretary saying, this is from Manchester Journal. That's where we got the story from.
Right.
Just to give them a bit of a shout out. She says, no federal or state employee, state law prohibits diversity, equity, or inclusion. Saunders wrote to the Department of Education. The request references certain DEI practices and illegal DEI, but neither term is defined in the request, and no definition has been provided.
That sounds like a lawyer talk to me.
Yes. She says, the Trump administration and Education Department guidance materials have attempted to cast DEI efforts as veiled, racially discriminatory practices that assign less value to certain students because of their race. That's not what takes place in Vermont's classrooms. And that's what she said. And it does not accurately reflect the goals, practices, or benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So.
Well, if you're a member of the oppressor race and you don't admit that you're a member of the oppressor race, it's not a very comfortable place to be. So I would say that right off the bat, if the designated oppressor race, that would be, white people, and you're not owning up to it, you're going to be pushing against the tide against the whole DEI movement right there.
That's right. Today's episode is also brought to you by One Day in July. One Day in July, excuse me folks, I pulled up the wrong ad. Here we go. Investment management. As financial advisors, One Day in July provides personalized investment management and financial advice to individuals, families, and institutions. They work with clients to understand their financial goals and build investment solutions. They are fiduciaries on all accounts for all clients. And sorry for the botched beginning to that. Sometimes when I read the ads, I have them ready to go, lined up, and I started reading the other one. So bear with me, folks.
Any other things that folks have been bringing up, that things that administration should be looking at?
Lisa Bombardier says, who do you think created LSD, ... The government. Look, this is one of those rabbit holes I've gone down, and there's a whole show you could do on it.
Yes, let's do it someday.
Yeah, guys.
Well, any other comments on DOGE, Paul? But thank you, Lisa. And actually, I do want to know about that rally.
She says it's the same one. I saw it. Are you going to the rally tomorrow? Hopefully, the organized protests are largely ignored. That's what EJ said. And she says there is a 50-51 VT branch. The Libs, they're hosting one. Same type of rally as the last one.
Okay.
So that's must be this weekend. To answer your question, no, I won't be attending any protests. I've been protested out. I've been to a lot of them. The J.D. Vance protesters were about all I ever needed to see of protesting ever again. So,
who, by the way, was at St. Peter's Chapel today. Not a bad place to be on Good Friday, huh? It's
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty special.
Yeah.
I saw that he was talking about that. And, just watching J.D. after coming here, I had a friend who was involved in the motorcade. He messaged me something like, I can't believe, he drove J.D. Vance's dogs, right, in the motorcade. Right. He's like, I can't believe it was still real. I can't even believe it was real. It was like this weird fever dream, and it's like, really was kind of odd. And watching him since go around and the things he's been saying, especially when it comes to this immigration issue, I'm very encouraged by the stance that he's taking, and to that point, I think a lot of, our state senators and people here in Vermont, I don't think they understand just how far a lot of people on the right wing really feel about immigration right now in this country, legal or non-legal. A lot of people, and that was another tweet that I put out, something like, I think we need to stop immigration right now. We need to figure out what's happening with the housing market in this country and what's happening to our economy, and figure out if there's domestic terrorism, right, real domestic terrorists in this country, because we're not just talking about, I think people don't understand how far the situation has gone. We're talking about 20 million people that are undocumented.
Right.
It's a lot of people.
Right.
J.D. Vance's stances I've been pretty encouraged by.
Yeah,
so.
Good. Any other comments on what should happen in Vermont? You mentioned something about Rob Roper, one of our
Yes,
buddies.
Rob Roper did reply. Rob said, audit Efficiency Vermont, audit the pre-K program.
Wow.
So those are his two.
Yes.
And so this is, to preface this a little bit, if you don't know who Rob Roper is, he's somebody who writes a Substack called Behind the Lines.
Yes.
And he also lets us repurpose his Substack on the Chronicle.
Rob is the best columnist in the state of Vermont.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Because you read a lot of commentary, and sometimes commentary can be a little bit over the top, or like, whoa.
Or boring.
Or boring.
And his is always right to the point. It's always funny. He's great.
He is great. And I love his language, too. He's a great writer.
Yeah.
But when Rob says something, when he replied to this, I was like, oh, Rob replied to this, because he usually doesn't care. Like, he's not. But he replied to this and said, audit Efficiency Vermont, audit the pre-K program. I think that's, I mean, hey, I think that's what the whole point of this DEI potential, they're trying to cut the funding to the public education system. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's something people are talking about doing. I don't know how that would affect pre-K, but probably would, right? I mean,
all that pre-K money comes from the payroll tax that we voted in last year.
Okay.
And the Efficiency Vermont money comes from I think it's a cent, on every kilowatt hour you buy on your electricity.
I see why he's saying that now.
So, and these are two brand new, well, fairly recent, huge, growing state infrastructures with government money. And Efficiency Vermont now, there's a bill. Normally, it was just all about making sure that you're weatherproofing and you have good light bulbs and everything. Now they're trying to get a law passed that you're using Efficiency Vermont to reach Vermont's carbon reduction goals. They're trying to weaponize it towards carbon reduction.
Yep.
So this is just a sort of metastasizing program that was started with one thing in mind, fairly frugal, and has just grown and grown and grown.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that both of those two things are taxes that are skimmed off the top of your tax without you really knowing. Because it is, I mean, you might see it, you might look at it, but you might not even know that this is happening. A lot of people, anyway, might not know.
Because everyone is paying it to some degree.
Everybody's paying it one way or another. And so I had probably 50 plus replies to that. I know.
We don't have time?
We don't have time for it all.
Oh, we've been doing all this talking? Oh.
I know, Guy. I know. We've been.
Give us. Give us a couple more.
I can give a couple more. This is David Adams. He said, here, I'll show it to you folks so you can see it.
Maybe this is next week's show, huh?
Maybe this is next week's show. David Adams says, maybe where all the FEMA funds went, that was supposed to help Vermonters. Wouldn't have had homeless families right now if they weren't screwed over. Maybe all the free housing the state is giving out to illegals and bums, forcing working families out of the state. I actually, part of my conversation with Mark Koster earlier today, he said he thinks, and maybe I shouldn't put words in his mouth because I kind of agree with him too, is if we removed all the non-citizens from the state of Vermont, we might not have the housing problem. And that's a people don't want to hear that. But David Adams,
you say non-citizens, non-U.S. citizens?
Non-U.S. citizens.
Okay.
Yeah, I clarified with him too. You mean not Vermonters, right? And he's like, no, I mean all U.S. citizens, so all non-U.S. citizens. And something he also said.
Well, it's a fair question though, Mark and Paul. Who's going to milk the cows? Because really, so can we really get rid of, all? Is that really a good move, or can we be aggressive but selective over who stays and who goes?
Well, I don't know. It kind of begs the question again, like if there are Vermonters or American citizens at least that are not getting housing or they're losing at the cost because we're just keeping these people
and
here.
that does happen.
And I keep hearing that whole point about like Vermont's agricultural businesses and how we need these folks to do the work. I don't know. I have a hard time, who's going to milk the cows? Vermont's economy, what is Vermont's economy? The federal government? Like, I don't, where are we talking about? How much milk, how much industry is really operating here where losing some illegal immigrants would destroy the Vermont economy? I just have such a hard time with
Yeah,
that. It's like...
It's a really good question. I don't know what the answer is. And I also know that the state of Vermont is not that interested in really answering that question either. That I have noticed. It's really hard to get really good data on non-citizen workers.
And another comment, this is from Hannah Banana. She says, NGOs supporting homeless initiatives and the DOE, Department of Education. I have plenty more, but I think those are costing us the most right now.
Huh.
And that kind of builds off of the same last point. And, you know, I did get a handful of responses basically saying, look into the NGOs, look into the nonprofits. You know, Vermont, I think something, I don't know the exact number, but I know per capita we have more nonprofits in the state than any other state. And that is, at the very least, worth looking into.
Don Keelan is one of our long-running columnists, and he has been thumping that tub for a long time, which is, wow, all the money the state spends through its nonprofits.
Here's another comment from EJ. EJ writes, Vermonters are largely misinformed, listening to the wrong news. That's right. They should be listening to the Vermont Daily Chronicle, which you can subscribe to on our website.
That's right.
You can subscribe to for free if you're not already doing that. If you're viewing this on Facebook, please like our page. If you're viewing this on X, follow us, retweet this show, share it. We want to make sure that Vermonters are not misinformed and they're getting the information that they need, the truth, because that really, what it boils down to here, folks, that's what we're trying to cover here at Vermont Daily Chronicle. We want to share with you the truth from our perspective to our very best of our ability. We don't want people to be misinformed or worse, disinformed. But Guy's going to show you.
And spread the word. And Rebecca Petre at that meeting last Saturday said, I want some bumper stickers. So Rebecca from Waterville, Vermont, here you go. Send me your address and I'll put one in the mail, okay? And anyone else. We'll make it happen. Paul and I will make it happen.
We'll make it happen. We'll figure it out. Well, I did receive a comment from somebody who said, we'll send a SASE for a bumper sticker. How about that? Does Paul know what an SASE is? I don't know what that is. Guy, do you? Do you, Tim? What
Tim, Google SASE.
Self-addressed stamped envelope. You go if you want to do that. We'll definitely send it. How about that?
And if you put $5 in it, it wouldn't break my heart either.
No, it wouldn't.
But yeah, that'd be great.
So
we love it.
With that, I think we're going to go to today's final sponsor for the show, Perro's Gun Shop. Who, by the way, if you don't follow them on X and you're viewing this on X, go follow them. They have some great content. I love the stuff that he's posting. You know, if you liked us shooting guns, check out Perro's. They're shooting guns, taking pictures of cool firearms I've never heard of or seen before. They have the most incredible selection of guns I've ever seen in my life at Perro's Gun Shop. Pretty incredible. But so again, you know, today's episode is brought to you by Perro's Gun Shop. Discover Perro's, Vermont's premier firearms destination, nestled in Waterbury. Explore an unparalleled selection of firearms complemented by their exclusive indoor firearm range, the one of its only kind in Vermont. That's right, the only one in Vermont, right in Waterbury. Right. Pretty cool. Elevate your skills with their comprehensive professional training classes tailored to every level of expertise. So even if you're a beginner, they'll teach you how to shoot if you've never shot. And they're dedicated to providing exceptional service and expertise for all of your firearms needs. So that was probably one of the most memorable things I've done this year, Guy. I don't know about you.
Yeah, me too.
It was pretty fun. So, and we did get our response. David let us know, self-addressed stamped envelope.
Thank you, David. P.O. Box 1547, Montpelier, Vermont, 05601. Send it along, and we'll send along a bumper sticker. So anyone, that's another show. Everyone, that's another show. Thank you for tuning in. And Sunday's coming. He is risen. And have a happy Easter, everyone.